world is split up into continents. There are 7 in all. And if you get the gist, we're gonna make a list from biggest to small. They are Asia, Africa, North and South America, Antarctica, Europe, and finally Australia. Asia, Africa, North and South America, Antarctica, Europe, and finally Australia.
Hey, my name is Asia, and more than half of the world lives here, but whatever.
And I am Africa with desert for miles, and my Nile is the longest river.
North America, start down in Panama, wide open spaces all the way to Canada.
I'm South America with animals galore, where the rainforest grows, cause the rain really pours.
I'm Antarctica, and I'm totally ours.
And I'm Europe, you're welcome for the pasta, pizza, waffles, and fries.
I am Australia, some call me Oceania. I got a lot of islands, too many to explain to ya.
We are Asia, Africa, North and South America, Antarctica, Europe, and finally Australia.
Hey everybody, welcome to week 3 of not being in school. I'd like to start off today's lesson by giving you guys some words of wisdom. When I was younger, my aunt once said to my cousin, if you keep eating like that, you'll never end up with a girlfriend. And you know what she's saying today? If you don't have a TikTok, you'll never get married. So just throwing that out there for you guys to know. I'm going to try to have today's lesson a little bit shorter than I have in the past, as in the other video that was like 36 minutes long. So we're going to kind of briefly go through some stuff instead of going through a PowerPoint. I have a review sheet, kind of graciously using that another teacher made a couple years ago. We're just going to cover the key points for both population and migration for Unit 2. So here we go. First, we got some like basic statistics and some vocab terms. So if you guys remember birth rate, births per 1,000 people, death rate, deaths per 1,000 people. And obviously this is going to be higher if you're in a less developed country because they have, well, less of an access to things like birth control. They have less access to things like education in terms of sexual reproduction. They may lack money to afford birth control, or they may lack money because they need all of their kids to work on the farm, right? So it's an economic necessity in that sense. So, and historically, that's what most of the world needed, a lot of people to work in agriculture. And so as you go through the economic levels of development, right, you need less and less people, or fewer and fewer people, because you're able to do other economic activities in the secondary and the tertiary sectors. Total fertility rate, average babies per woman, and replacement is 2.1, right? So you have 2 kids to replace the 2 parents. It's 2.1 because some people don't have kids, some people can't have kids. Life expectancy, that's a big one, how long you're expected to live at birth. Obviously that's a symbol of your economic success as well. We've covered that. Infant mortality rate, crude death rate, again, we already just went over that. So infant mortality rate, right? Like they might not have access to sanitation systems, clean water, waste disposal. Maybe they're dying of diseases. We'll get into it. So population density, covered this briefly at the beginning of the year. There are 2 major ones, actually 3. So arithmetic density, it's the amount of people living in a given unit area of land. And so some of the land may not be usable, some of it may be usable in terms of farming. So if we took the entire country of the United States, right, what's our population density? The example on here is Japan. It's 340 people per square kilometer. But then you can look at it by arable land, right? The land that people actually use to make food. And so the United States has a physiological density of 186 people per square kilometer. whereas Egypt has way more. What that means is they're living closer to where the food is produced because perhaps they're less developed. The Nile River. So, gonna keep going. And this is where we're gonna get into our, big money calculations here. Wait, big money. Okay, back to the calculations. So where do people live, right? Actually, we're not calculating yet. I did that too early. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to re-record this. So people live where it's not too hot, it's not too dry, and it's not too wet. So they have the ability to live life. And then when they live in these populated areas, right, the areas that tend to be clustered are, for example, Europe, Southeast Asia, specifically like India, and then if we look at Indonesia and like Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos, and then Eastern Asia, so Japan, a whole bunch of people on this island, or several islands, and then we're including China in there as well, right, 1.4 billion people. And then these countries, sort of as they, go about their daily existence, they may choose to adopt pro-natalist or anti-natalist policies. If you guys remember, it's still going. Pro-natalist is do it for Denmark, right? Trying to encourage population growth. Whereas anti-natalist is like, whoa, slow down. We did those propaganda posters for Unit 3. So typically you become pro-natalist as you become more and more economically developed, right? Because people are having fewer kids, but there's some problems with that. You have a low population issues, which means there aren't replacements in the economy, right? So like 5 people might retire, and they were very skilled doctors, and we only have 3 doctors replacing them. That's probably going to be a big issue for healthcare, but also in the grand scheme of the economy, right? Those people are leaving and those jobs are going unfilled. Therefore, our economy is going to sort of go down. And some policies to implement that, right? Do it for Denmark was like, they'll give you a vacation. They'll give you diapers every month for a year. They'll give you extra money. They'll give you free education if you have more kids, like college and university. And they also have parental leave. Anti-natalist policies, you're going to have things to reduce the birth rate. And that's generally when we're less developed in terms of the economy. We're having way too many kids, right? There aren't enough resources maybe to go around. It's a big strain on a lot of families economically. So maybe it also could not be enough space potentially. And so what are some things that you can do to have fewer kids? Well, in the example of China, right, they said the one-child policy. They made it literal law. It's the two-child policy now. And if you broke that law, you lost a lot of benefits for your kids. You could even lose your job as the parent, and they would basically take away the extra retirement money that you might have. You might get no pay during maternity and parental leave, therefore disincentivizing you from having kids. They might make birth control free or next to free, so that'd be one way to reduce the birth rate. All right, moving on. Here's where we're doing our calculations, but I'm not going to do the thing again. So population pyramids, hopefully you guys remember this. You see 3 basic things. Let's zoom in on one of these. Okay, so this is for Afghanistan. And we have the male and the female sides. So that's the first thing. It tells us the gender. Second thing is it's going to tell us population. And then the third thing is going to tell us the age group, right? So 0 to 4 is the largest population in Afghanistan, for both genders. And so you can look at this and glean a lot of information from it. So if you guys remember the different shapes, it tells us where they are in the demographic transition model. No country is in stage 1. Stage 2 and 3, population is growing pretty rapidly. So for example, Afghanistan has this triangle shape, and they're going to be in stage 2. What that means is their population is rapidly increasing, and their death rates are sort of starting to drop off. People are going to start living longer. But what does this mean right here? What do we look at this graph? What can we tell? Well, once these kids get into primary school age, we're going to need a lot of teachers, we're going to need a lot of schools, we're going to need tax money for those schools. And then in 20 years, they're going to have to go to college. They're going to have to go work in the economy somewhere. You're going to need jobs in an industrial sector. You're going to need a service sector. So these are things that people can use at the policy level, the government, to see what their country needs to do in the next couple of years. And it also tells us, hey, we have a lot of young people and not a lot of old people. But the working age, so like 18 to 65, isn't that great either, right? So young people and old people are dependent on that working class. So the dependency ratio can also tell us a lot about different countries too. So let me zoom out. So the demographic transition model. This is sort of the first big concept we covered we did agriculture first and then we did this. And this is kind of the one thing that kids have trouble wrapping their head around, so pay attention. Basically, right, it tells us how fast our population is growing. And then there are different reasons for entering the stages. So, right, you start in stage 1 if you're not a country. This was like historical. People died and people were born in very high rates. But population wasn't growing because people wouldn't live that long. The average life expectancy would have been like 30 to 40. Until the Industrial Revolution comes around and we are able to start making a bunch of awesome things in terms of industrialization. And so population is going to rapidly increase. People are going to start living longer and they're going to start to have fewer and fewer kids sort of as we progress through the stages. And then by the time you get to stage 4, you're not having that many kids because kids are expensive. You need to pay a lot of money. Your country has developed to a high level and you have to pay for like diapers, entertainment, clothing, food, all that sort of stuff that you guys need. And so here are the different reasons why the birth rate's high and the death rate's high, but let's cover 2 and 4 really quickly. Children needed for farming in the sort of stage 2 phase, they die at an early age, right? They might not have clean water, they might not have vaccines, they might not have enough food. And there's no family planning. So what that means is no sex education, which means population is going to rapidly increase. You have 8 kids and you expect 3 of them to die. So you're going to have 5, right? That's still a lot. And then death rates start to slowly decline because we have medical improvements. So vaccines, sanitation, water supply, food supply, that's sort of basic stuff. And then sort of, actually we are going to cover 3. Once we get to 3, right, you have to start remembering who has the kids, the women, and women start to get more and more rights in stage 3 and 4, which means they're going to be working in the economy and there's less time to have kids. So additionally, you have sex education, contraceptives become more widely available, they're cheaper, and women take advantage of that. So then the birth rates will start to decline. The death rates are low because we're living longer with better healthcare and better education. Stage 5 is when you have more people dying than being born. Again, this goes back to our issue with you need pronatalism to prevent the economy from going down. I'm at 12 minutes, so I'm going to try to move up. Maybe I'll make a second video for migration. So one thing we didn't talk about that's kind of really relevant now is the epidemiological transition model. What that means is infectious diseases sort of being really infectious and then over time a little bit less. So here is a good one. Non-communicable disease. So that would be something like, I don't know, osteoporosis or diabetes or someone with heart problems. Those start to increase as we develop our healthcare system. But infectious diseases like the flu or malaria or coronavirus, early in the epidemiological transition they're very, very deadly, right? You can see the mortality rate on the y-axis. So currently, coronavirus, because it's this new sort of thing that we don't have a vaccine for, a new virus, the mortality rates are going to be very, very high. And then over time, we're going to figure out ways like social distancing, self-isolation, quarantine, shelter in place as of today, and they'll become less infectious. And then we get to the vaccine stage where they become hopefully not there anymore. Hopefully no one will get them. And you can kind of directly overlay this with the demographic transition model. People don't develop osteoporosis because they don't live long enough in stage 2 countries. But because they're living to 80, now they're finally getting the bone problems. Now they're finally getting cancer. They're living long enough for those issues to develop. Previously in stage 2 and 3, when they had high infectious issues with viruses and diseases, they were dying before they could get to old age. So, then we've got a couple of population theories that we're going to cover real quick. Thomas Malthus basically said, food supply is linear. Population growth is exponential. Eventually, we're going to run out of food for all these people. That necessarily has never happened. We've always had these new technological increases, if you remember from the agricultural unit, that we can get more and more food for these people, including us. So that hasn't happened yet. And then sort of the true thing that happens, if you remember Hans Rosling's videos, basically population will sort of, it's an S-curve. It'll taper off over time because we'll have limited resources. And Hans Rosling says this will happen around 10 to 11 billion people. So keep on going. All right, so we've got women and old people. All right, so as women gain more status in the economy, for example, let's use Japan, right? The birth rate, for one reason it's declining in Japan, is that women have more access to careers. And it's a very prestigious thing to work as a lawyer or a doctor, and their society values those things, working hard as well. And that means you're not going to have enough time to take care of a kid. And kids are going to be really expensive. And so you probably don't have time to date. You might not have time to have a kid. You don't want to have a kid if it's going to take you out of that prestigious role you've worked so hard for and traditionally haven't been allowed to have. So women, sort of as they gain more economic prowess, will perhaps be less inclined to have kids in the traditional sense. And then you guys can sort of read through the rest of this on your own. And then old people. We love our old people. As death rates decrease, that's a good thing, so they can live to see their grandkids and great-grandkids. And sort of the reason for that is better healthcare, right? But what that means is they're very dependent on the working population. Right here's Japan's population pyramid from 2011, which was 9 years ago. There was a decent working class, right? A lot of people about to retire at 60 to 64. And this is what it'll be in 2050. A lot of old people, especially post-retirement, and these working class people are going to have to, carry that burden. Whereas like the younger populations are slowly tapering off, which means there are going to be fewer and fewer people. So that's a sort of nutshell of what population is, and I'll stop the video now. Mwah.